We're Kim and Al. Last year, we made some pretty big changes. We retired, sold our house in the city, and moved north to an old farm homestead at the end of its life. Our plan is to build an off-grid home ourselves. This year, with our solar and septic systems completed, as well as basic four-season shelter, we're ready to take on the challenge of building our forever home. We're excited to share our experience as we continue to create this new life on the North River.
Hey folks, we are, it's siding time, like we mentioned, probably all summer. We kept saying that we were going to get to the siding, and finally here we are, and summer's over. I think this is the last day of August, and it is what it is. So just a couple things about this siding that we've got. It's vertical board and batten, not real board and batten. So traditional board and batten siding is just that. You have boards, usually, you know, about 7 or 8 inches wide or whatever you have available. Then once you've installed all the boards, you cover all the joints with a thinner strip, and that's your batten. So then you end up with that old school barn look where you have the boards with the piece that kind of sticks out a bit, and it has a nice kind of overall look to it. The vinyl version that we have, the board and the batten are one piece, and it's just like click flooring, if anyone's worked with that. Except it's a lot simpler. It's not as permanent as click flooring. Like, you can undo click flooring, but it is a very tight fit. Whereas with this vinyl siding, from what I can see, it just kind of slides into place, like the two pieces hooked together like that, and they don't click in. There's no force you have to exert. They just slide in together and rest. So the one thing that you need to be aware of, when you nail it, you'll see that there's little, and we'll show you in some close-up shots, but there's little slices or little grooves all the way along each edge, and that's your nailing edge. And the idea is that you want to put the nail right in the middle, not at the top or the bottom, and you don't want to pound it in tight. You always want to leave a little bit of room. The whole idea is that because this material will expand and contract in the cold and in the heat, you want to ensure that it has a little play or a movement. So it has to be able to move. So the idea is that this is our J channel, homemade, because we want it to, you know, be made of the cedar and of the slabs, and just kind of tie everything in together. But the idea is that this goes against the wall, and then the pieces will sit on top of this J channel. And then I'm going to drill holes every foot, I think it is, so that if any water runs down the siding into this channel, that it can drain out and drip out and dry, so that it doesn't sit in there, rot and grow mold and all kinds of stuff that happens when you trap water where water ought not be. So the thing that you need to be aware of, that I just found out today, although it nagged me in the back of my head how we would end up not having it look weird, is if you look at your siding and say, in our case, these vertical strips, say they're 7 inches wide. If you were just to start at one end, the only way it's going to look symmetrical and proper is if by some miracle you built your house to be a perfect factor of whatever the width is of your siding. So if our house is perfectly a factor of 7 inches, then we know if we start at one end, when we get to the other end, we're going to use a full piece. It's going to look really nice. So that's very unlikely. So what you're supposed to do is you take the length of the wall that you're going to side, You divide that by whatever the width is of each piece. So say, again, using that example, 7 inches. If it's a 200-inch wall, divide that by 7, and then you use the whole number. That will tell you how many full pieces you can use. The remainder, you divide that by 2, and that becomes the 2 end strips. So in other words, if I, you know, all things being equal, if I can put 17 pieces along this wall and then have 4 inches left over, it means I want a 2-inch strip on the left and a 2-inch strip on the right. Otherwise, it's going to look wonky. So that was one thing that you really want to get that right and figure that out ahead of time. You don't want to be all the way at the end and realize that you have to shift everything over and pull all the nails out. It'd be a little nightmare-y. So the other thing that we have to contend with, obviously the window. So we just finished flashing it. So we had the flashing of the actual window frame before we installed the window, and then I believe this is called counter flashing. It's the flashing that you put on the outside to basically seal from the window to the previous flashing, the initial flashing that we put in. So now water hits this, cannot get in behind the window, it's nice and clean, and now the next piece would be to put our frame around it. So we were just talking about this. We're going to decide today how we want the frames to look themselves. Once the frames are installed, then we can put all the J channel in, and then we can start putting up the siding. The other thing that we have to contend with this wall is that eventually this is going to be a big garage door. But since that's going to be a year or 2 down the road, or maybe more, the door, because it's going to be a couple of years, maybe 3, maybe more, who knows, before we're actually ready to take the trailer out and move into the house proper, we're just going to cover it and the siding, and then when we're ready, we're going to basically cut out the garage door, build some framing around that to make it clean, and then the siding that we cut out, that's going to probably be the cover for the door if we want to do it. Like if we want to do 2 like bifolding, like, you know, traditional barn doors that open up from left to right and right to left, we'll cover it in that siding so that it's all matchy-matchy. So that's what we're contending with. This will be the most difficult wall, I think. Probably followed by this one because it's got the windows, the 4 windows that we'll have to cut around. And then finally the back wall, which has the chimney sticking out. But that's what we're up to today.
So we're finally going to use the barn board that we took out of the farmhouse top floor last summer. We're going to use it on the enclosure, what will eventually be our guest house, we've decided, once we move out, of course. And we're going to be using it all along the bottom, the 2 feet, all the way around, and then around the roof, the part that shows, and then the drip edge underneath, and around the windows. And the way that we're going to finish the wood is we're going to use an 18th century Japanese technique of charring the wood with fire, and then putting a natural oil on it afterwards, just to preserve it. We've seen other do-it-yourselfers do this, and it looks just gorgeous. We really love the way that it looks, and also, because the barn board is older, it's probably the best way to preserve it anyway, just so that it all matches and looks the same. So pretty pumped about this project. We really are looking forward to having the enclosure finished and just complete.
folks, we're doing a little post-action explanation of one of the techniques that we use. I know Kim explains it in the video, but just because when we were reviewing the footage and seeing how insane, I thought it was super fun, and it was as exciting as it was to do it. Kim thought it was a little dangerous, or at least seemed dangerous, so we wanted to explain why we're doing it, what we were doing. So she had mentioned it is an old, it's like a Japanese construction method, or like a wood preservation method. The idea is that you burn the exterior of the wood, and I guess I've never really looked into the science. I'm just taking a guess, so if I get this wrong, shmeh. But I believe the idea is that when you char the outside of the wood, you're basically changing it to carbon, right? Chemically altering it. It's no longer wood, it's carbon. And anybody that's ever gone camping, for instance, if you have a pot and it gets blackened on the bottom, when you go to wash that, if you just pour water on top of it, you'll see that it beads right off. It's like completely waterproof, and you have to use some soap and wash it off. So I think that's really what happens here and why it preserves the wood. But where I learned that, just to give credit, was another channel. I think it's called My Self-Reliance. We watched it a long time ago. Interesting individual. He bought some property up around South River, and he built a log cabin. But this guy is hardcore. Like he cut all his own trees, debarked them all himself. He's used all hand tools to do the work, like including hand sawing, rip sawing his own boards and everything. So he ended up doing his entire roof using this method, and that's where I learned to make that chimney. So you take 3 boards at a time, you make a triangle, like basically a chimney, a tube. In my case, I think he might have used rope. I used rebar tie wire, because we have a whole bunch of it left over from the work we did in the foundation, or the foundation. Anyways, you secure the 3 boards together. You don't even need a big fire. You start a fire in your pit, then you pick that chimney up, place it over top, and what happens is it literally drafts air up, including the fire at the bottom. If you wait, and it only takes a few seconds, it will start to catch the wood on fire in the interior of your chimney, and then once it gets started, you watch it go. It becomes like a big jet in it, and the fire just shoots straight up and straight out the chimney, and you just wait a couple of seconds, not very long, because it doesn't take long for that to basically wreck the wood. You just want to char the exterior, and that's the process. And so once you see that chimney fire going, you kind of can take a look through the cracks and see what the interior looks like. And then once it's sufficiently charred, you take it off, you take it apart, flip it around, put it back together so that the unburnt sides are on the inside now, and then repeat the process. It's super fun to do, it's super fun to watch, because it literally, like you just see, it looks like a blowtorch just shooting straight up into the sky, which for me was fun. And really, it was a pretty windy day we did it. I would probably recommend that you pick a day that's not quite so windy, because it tends to make it harder to control that chimney, to keep it from blowing over, for one. And then wind and fire don't mix, makes things unpredictable. But that's the dealio, and it worked out really well when we're done. And this part, I'm not sure. Kim did some reading as well, and they had mentioned finishing it with some oil. And one of the other YouTubers that we watch, Wild Wonderful Off Grid, they used oil to finish it, but I don't know if that's an aesthetic thing or if that's a necessary part of the preservation. But anyways, that's what the internet is for. We oiled it anyways, because hey, why not? And here we are.
the turquoise blue, losing track of time with you. Another beach pie sunset view, sleeping in the afternoon. No place to be and nothing to prove. That's sure something I could use. A cure for the air conditioning.
It's just perfect for this river. Boom.
Nice.
Yeah, that was tip top shelf. What's that? Neighbor drive by. So the try that again. So the